You're all ready, all right? So am I.
No, not just yet.
Hey.
Take some time.
All right, ready?
It's going.
Good. My name is Dr. Aaron Rossi. This is Rossi Chiropractic Center, my office. Thank you for coming. Tonight we're talking about COVID and the shots. And not just the COVID shot. We're going to talk about other vaccines as well. And then health overall, okay? I've got a lot to cover, so let's get started. All right, now, what you're looking at, that's an example of a germ, of a virus, okay? Now, those little red spiky things, that are the spike proteins, okay? Now, what I always call that is, that's the business end of the germ. Okay? That is the thing that will interact with your cells. Imagine giant cells with doors all over them, because stuff has to get in and out of cells, right? Those doors all have locks, and those spike proteins are like their keys, okay? The germ has a key, and that's how it gets in and out and interacts with and infects your cells, okay? Now, here's the interesting thing about COVID, though, specifically, that spike protein is actually poisonous in and of itself. You know, normally when you take a virus and a virus attaches to that cell, it gets over to the door of the cell, it unlocks the lock and brings its material into the cell, and it takes over the cell. That's the way that whole viral infection thing goes, right? Well, it's not just that that's harmful in COVID. It's spike protein. If you were to break those off and let them just flow through the body, that alone would be poisonous, harmful, okay? So another way to think of the spike protein, and the way I want you to think of, when you hear spike proteins, you're gonna hear this. Now that I'm training you on this, you'll hear people talking about spike proteins, okay? When you hear that from now on, I want you to think of this. The only dangerous part to a snake really is its fangs, okay? And the spike protein is that for the germ. It is toxic, dangerous, poisonous, okay? Now, your body, it will identify that germ. This is how it works. When you have germs floating around, your body is busy identifying those germs. It will remember those germs, and the next time you encounter them, it will muster up the same response it had prepared, and then it'll deploy its defenses, and you'll quickly handle it. That's what immunity is, okay? Now, hear me on this too. Immunity is not just antibodies. Have you heard antibodies? You'll hear this too, okay? Think of it kind of like cops. If there's certain kinds of criminals on the streets, you might need certain kind of cops, okay? The criminals are your germs, and those specific kind of cops are your antibodies, all right? So after your body has been trained by encountering the germs in the wild, it will then deploy the right kind of cops or the right kind of munition against the criminals it's found. Follow me? Now, here's some other high points along COVID. These things some of this will be memorable to you. Now, the thing about that spike protein's ability to affect you is it was like a master key too. That fang could fit a lot of different locks all around your body. That's why when people had COVID, it affected them in lots of different ways, okay? And of course, it affected our smell and our taste. That was a common one. But it affected lungs, and it affected your joints. It affected brain, okay? People had brain fog, all kinds of things people had because the germ had a key that fit in a lot of different locks. You see it? Does that make sense to you? Now, we had a lot of talk around masks, and let me just put one of these details to rest here. If I were to take a mask, the kind of mask that we all had, the kind of mask that you had access to, and I were to enlarge it really, really big, like massively big, so that this border, you see, is the size of the pore in a mask. The size of the germ, the size of the coronavirus germ exiting you when you cough or sneeze is that, okay? So that is the equivalent, that is what you're asking a mask to do. So that's why masks didn't work. That's why masks don't work when you're dealing with respiratory virus-like stuff, okay? The masks don't even block smoke. And smoke particles are much larger than any virus. Now, here's the unfortunate catch to this, you guys, is that bacteria, though, are much bigger. Like, to a bacteria, a virus is microscopic, okay? a bacteria is so much bigger, it will readily get caught. Like I'm the size of the bacteria. I would readily get caught in a pore this size, okay? Right? Now, that mask that will not protect you from viruses is gonna build up bacteria in that mask, and then you get to rebreathe and recirculate those bacteria. Okay, so while it doesn't necessarily help you in this scenario, it definitely led to increased chances of bacterial problems, bacterial infections, skin bacterial infections. It was quite common the last 2 years. Now, you've probably heard of long COVID. Have you ever heard of long COVID?
Mm-hmm.
Long COVID is when those pesky germs kept on going and they would affect your powerhouses inside your cells. Do you know that from biology in high school? Mitochondria, they're the powerhouse of the cells. They take in the stuff and they give you ATP. Remember ATP? You don't have to remember it, but if you do, great, a bonus for you. Right? You get, that's your energy, that's your fuel. The stuff inside the cell that makes the fuel, that makes all the engine go. Now when I'm saying engine, I'm not just talking about muscles. I'm actually talking about the engine that drives everything, meaning your ability to think, your ability to digest, your ability to muster immune responses. All of that needs fuel. And COVID messed with people's fuel systems. That's why people who had COVID could feel fine. They get out of their car, walk up their driveway, and feel winded. Okay? It affected those power producing things inside your cells. It affected your engine inside you. Okay? Now, here's the next thing. We heard there was lots of talk, lots of things about, hey, the way it's contagious. Can you catch it from someone who has a symptom? Can you not catch it? There's all this stuff. And so, you know, how about I let someone famous discuss this topic? Let's see if our sound works here. We all know who this fellow is.
One thing that seems to get lost in that question is that as
I can't turn it
I
up.
agree, we would
I was trying to turn up the last 10 minutes.
Because if there is asymptomatic transmission, it impacts certain policies that you do regarding screening, etc. But the one thing historically people need to realize that even if there is some asymptomatic transmission, in all the history of respiratory-borne viruses of any type, asymptomatic transmission has never been the driver of outbreaks. The driver of outbreaks is always a symptomatic person. Even if there's a rare asymptomatic person that might transmit, an epidemic is not driven by asymptomatic carriers.
An epidemic is not driven by asymptomatic carriers. Okay. Now that guy, who we all know, he sounded really confident a lot over the last 2 years, and it turns out a lot of things he said was not quite accurate. So, is this accurate? I don't know. But what he did say was years before this pandemic. So let's give him the benefit of the doubt on that one, because he's quoting some other stuff that a bunch of other people say too. That, yeah, asymptomatic people don't drive epidemics. It's symptomatic people who do, okay? Now, what's worth knowing is that kids were unaffected by this. It didn't bother kids, okay? In fact, I'm gonna argue, and I'm gonna lay a case down in front of you, that it didn't actually affect a lot of people, least of all kids, okay? If you look at the death rate, the mortality death rate around the world, and you compare it to other such things, it had the equivalent or lesser than death rate than flu, okay? Some seasonal flus were much worse than this, okay? And if you compare, of course, 2020 to 2019, it was the same in terms of how many people died. Now, there's always more people in the world because our population is still getting bigger, right? So every year there's a slight uptick, but they account for that kind of thing when they're doing these kinds of stats. And there wasn't, accounting for that stat uptick of population going up, there was no increase in death. Now, this one, I want you to pay attention to this line here, okay? This is the first couple of months in 2020. This line is the line that represents hospitalizations for the flu. The flu. And the flu suddenly decided to go on vacation. No one was getting the flu, but at the same time the flu was going down, it's this line, because this is the same year here, suddenly COVID came up. A nice handoff. No flu, COVID. Did the flu suddenly go away, or did maybe doctors change what they diagnosed? I'm gonna go put my money on that one. They started because it's the germ that had all the press. It's the germ that had all of the attention, and so it got all of the diagnosis. Oh, what am I hearing? Am I hearing cha-ching, cha-ching? Yeah. So yeah, you can hear it falling. Yeah, it also happened to be rather incentivized. Now I know this isn't new to any of people in here probably, but yeah. So what happened is when you got a diagnosis of COVID, you got a lot more money given to you because we were in this emergency state. The hospitals got a lot more money with every diagnosis of COVID. So there was a lot of incentive, okay? Now, there's problems with that incentive, but I'm gonna not pick on that a lot. I'm gonna pick on other things. The thing I'm gonna pick on a lot is the CDC. I'm gonna pick on them a lot, okay? I wanna give you an example. They don't tell the truth a lot, okay? One example they did last summer is when they emphasized, they said, watch out for Delta. Delta has people going in the hospital at 10 times the rate. It's terrible, it's scary, you should be alarmed. We didn't alarm you enough with the Alpha variant, so we're gonna scare you more with the Delta variant, right? And they were talking about 10 times increase. What they're talking about is when no one had it in June, and then Delta came along in August, they compared this to this. They did not compare this to that. So while they said there's 10 times more, which is technically accurate, it wasn't 10 times more the first big bad wave we had. It was 10 times more the lull that we just had. And the other catch too is, by the way, yeah, these were hospitalizations, these were diagnoses, but some of the viciousness of the Delta and the severity of the Delta was a lot less anyway. But they just like to count case numbers because case numbers were easy to count. Okay.
I have a question, a clarification on that.
What is your question?
So did they count on those cases? Were they counted if they were vaccinated or unvaccinated?
That's a wonderful question. What do you say? Answer that question with a video. Yeah, was it vaccinated or unvaccinated, right?
Well, that's
so
a valid
do you remember this? A
Yeah.
pandemic of the unvaccinated. They threw this
They
at
sure did.
people. Okay, this is a pandemic of the unvaccinated. And only the irresponsible unvaccinated people are driving this. Okay, well, that CDC boy, they certainly were creative with their numbers, and let me share with you some of this creativity.
Even in the spring in the United States, our CDC had a fully documented 10,000 cases of vaccine failures by the end of May. So we knew the vaccines were even failing before the Delta variant moved in. And in fact, the CDC gave up on this, and they started doing what's called asymmetric reporting, meaning that they were not going to count vaccine failures in the COVID-19 rates. And that's how the talking points were generated. And this is important to understand, that they were only going to report COVID-19 community cases in those that were unvaccinated, that they were no longer going to track COVID-19 in those who had received vaccination. And if they became aware, if the first test was obtained in the hospital and they were vaccinated, they would try to link it up with vaccine databases. But otherwise, the CDC is intentionally and willfully blind to breakthrough cases for COVID-19 vaccination. So that's what's created the false and fraudulent talking point that 99% of American cases are unvaccinated. It's not true. It's probably roughly 50-50. And that's what we're seeing in practice. We have about half the cases are indeed vaccine failures.
And that's what I'm hearing from my friends in ER, and obviously what we're seeing in other nations around the world, especially Israel, where that's probably the best test group to be looking at as a nation.
Asymmetric reporting is a thing. They can legally and apparently epidemiologically count some people and not count others. So I have a medical doctor friend of mine that explained the perspective of that is like, well, it's assuming that if they're vaccinated, then they should be okay, and we're only concerning ourselves with the count of the people who are unvaccinated. It's all a lot of assumptions, and they stopped doing that after a time. Places like England didn't do that, and we'll get to English data shortly. Now, back to the way that data is manipulated by the CDC. What happened in March of 2020 is when COVID started coming around and we started learning about it, what they did is change how they're going to report the deaths of people. So what typically happens if, let's say someone is very sick, let's say they have runaway diabetes, they got a cancer and they've got obesity and they've got a liver problem, they got a bunch of problems. And then they get a cold, and that cold happens to be famous, it's COVID, right? They catch a COVID and then they die. What they used to do is they would give the oldest and first problem they had, that's the cause of death. And then they would attribute, and with like a little nod towards the extra stuff like COVID. That finally, it was the final straw that broke the back. Instead, in March 24th of 2020, they changed their rules. Now, there are federal laws that dictate how rules can be changed. There's 3 of them specifically. Things like the Paperwork Reduction Act and the Accurate Information Act. There's like these 3 different, like very, very, very dry sounding legal rules, but they're still laws, and every federal agency has to follow these laws if they're going to change rules. The CDC did not. They didn't follow these 3 rules. They broke 3 federal laws, and they changed their death reporting for COVID only. March 24th, 2020. Now, those previous rules they had worked fine for 17 years. Those previous rules they had during their swine flu, during their avian flu, during the West Nile virus, during the Zika virus, during SARS-1, they worked fine for all those, but they decided to change it and only specifically for COVID. Now, you fast forward 5 months. This is funny. You fast forward 5 months to 2020, so now we're in August of 2020. People are dying, okay? People are dying of all kinds of things. Now, with the new criteria that the CDC has defined, they've attributed 161,000 deaths in the first 5 months of the pandemic. 161,000 deaths to COVID. That sounds terrifying. I think that was the point, to be terrifying. If instead they used their previous rules without breaking the federal laws, the rules that worked fine for 17 years, there would have been 9,684 deaths.
Wow.
That's, you know what it's a multiple of, strangely? That's 16.66%, or 16.66 fold. That's an ironic number. 16.66 fold increase. They nearly by 17 times they inflated the number. Okay? Now, this is the thing to know about a COVID shot. Okay? Every other shot introduces to your body a germ with an irritant. And so the body is irritated and notices the germ and then tries to handle the germ, and then the idea is it'll remember it, and then you will be protected when you encounter it in the wild. This is not really the way it works that well, but that's the idea. You have a germ introduced, or some version of a germ introduced in your body. Okay? Now, the COVID shot was not that at all. Okay, what it was instead is a instruction for your body to make the spike protein. Okay? So it's this little fat globule, it's a little bubble of fat, a lipid nanoparticle they call it. It's a little bubble of fat, and inside this little bubble of fat is this little mRNA. You'll probably hear these terms too, mRNA, right? So these are instructions that they're encoded in fat, and then when they inject it, it's supposed to stay there, but it does not. It then will stream through your body, go everywhere throughout your body. And they've known that for 10 years. This is not new technology. Those little fat bubbles go everywhere. So now you've got toxic fat bubbles floating throughout your whole body, taking the instructions. And these instructions go into your cells. Remember, they go into all those doors, those are the keys and locks, goes into a cell, and then your cells start to make the FANG, the spike protein. And your body's making it and making it. Okay? And now spike protein goes right now, this is poisonous toxic spike protein, and it goes throughout your body. Now, how long does your body make it? They don't know. When does your body kick it? It's uncertain. What has been found is that your body can continue to make it for at least 10 months from the first injection. They're not certain. See, that's the problem, right? There wasn't an off switch to this treatment. Now, here's another thing about shots. There's 3 things that you look for when you're trying to make a good shot, a good vaccine. You're looking for a germ that doesn't match other stuff, other proteins that are already in the body, because you don't want your immune system to get confused and attack the similar proteins that are you. You want to only attack the protein that's the germ, right? So you want to have something that's not similar to your other body proteins. You want to have something that isn't toxic. Okay, because why would you want to inject a poisonous toxic something into somebody? And you want to have something that is not very changeable, because germs, they like to change themselves. The flu virus that changes itself. You want something that will be pretty stable. So something that will stay the same, not be toxic, and not be too similar to other parts in you. Okay, these are things they look for. Now, what the spike protein is exactly like other proteins in your body. It is very, very toxic. It is, but different enough, just different enough. There are certain chains of protein in our body that do match the spike protein, right? It's toxic, and it still changes itself so much. That's why we have the alpha, the delta, the omicron, all these variants, because it does change itself. In other words, giving your body instructions to make spike protein was the worst choice that could be made. Now, who I'm quoting when I say this is Dr. Mike Yaden. He's the former executive of Pfizer in charge of vaccine development. And he was retired, and he was getting a fat pension and a fat consulting salary, going places and teaching. And then he comes out and starts talking about this. This is the worst one to choose. But here's the extra part to this. It's not just that they picked the worst thing to choose. Every company did the same thing. Pfizer picked the same. AstraZeneca picked the same. Moderna picked the same. Johnson & Johnson picked the same. And other international firms picked the same stuff, the same worst one. The only way you can get multinational companies all around the world who have never picked the same germ for their vaccines, the only way you get that is coordination. It was organized. Now, all of this should rightly make you assume that there would be harms to this. Okay? Now, we have a system called VAERS. It's a vaccine adverse event reporting system. And when someone has a problem, they can enter in the system. It's very tedious and it's very underused. Okay? But these are the numbers. These are the numbers just for COVID. Now, you guys, you need to hold on to your butts. I'm going to throw lots of graphs at you. This one, look at it like this. Look at it like this. The point to VAERS is they're looking to see if there could be any troubles. They're looking to see if there's a signal. Are people being harmed? And then we need to investigate this. These right here, these represent numbers of children. Numbers of children who have died after their vaccines. Okay? Children who've died after vaccines. Now these are little nubs. Okay? It averages, when you get out here, in the last 10 years or so, it averages about 155 kids a year are dying because they're shots. Now, what you get here, you add this up, that's 30,000 deaths.
And that's underreported.
That's underreported by a factor. Well, now, all of these are underreported by a factor of 100. They estimate that only 1% get reported here. This all the people who've done math on this and looked at this hard, they've estimated that this is an underreported number by about a factor of 31. So multiply that by 31, and you might have a more accurate number. Okay, now no one knows what the number is, but a lot of people who've looked at a lot of different databases and did a lot of different statistics that's far above my pay grade calculate that it should be multiplied by about 31.
And those are children's deaths?
No, these are
Oh,
everybody.
Oh, okay, but
Okay.
all the other ones
All these are
children.
kids. Those are kids.
Okay.
Okay, but here's the thing. If I am with the CDC and I'm looking for a danger signal, can any of you see a signal in that? Does anything jump out at you? Does anything say, look, there's something that possibly is wrong here? It doesn't take a brilliant person to notice something's wrong here. Now, this isn't just the fact that it's happened. It's also you can tie it into the timing. Okay? What you have here,
Wow.
0 means this person died the day they got the shot. This person died the one day after the shot. And 2 and 3, if this had nothing to do with the shot, this number would be flat.
Mm-hmm.
You could ski off that slope and it'd be a back diamond. There's nothing coincidental about this. This is causative.
Do they differentiate between the mRNA versus the J&J? I know that they're two different technologies, and
It's
is
so
one
what
more
is
dangerous than the other? Or?
it's a debatable question. What's being delivered is still mRNA. It's still, your body is still making spike protein. Okay, how the bus ride that messenger took is a little bit different, but your outcome is the same. Okay, now here's one thing that is interesting, that the little micrograms of what you get, the stuff that makes you make the spike protein, the mRNA, the micrograms of mRNA, right? Johnson & Johnson's one shot had 60 micrograms of it. Pfizer's 2 shots had 40 and 40, so you got a total of 80. Moderna's had 100 and 100, a total of 200. So Moderna gave you the biggest dose of the substance that made you make spike protein. Johnson & Johnson gave you the least. Okay?
That's interesting.
Now, this didn't just happen in America, because these COVID shots happened around the world. Okay? Were numbers like this detectable elsewhere? Turns out that they were. What you're going to see here is deaths before the shot and after the shot was introduced.
Total deaths. Total.
Deaths, yes. Deaths.
Oh, jeez.
So we had, this is alphabetical. Brazil with 4. This is Burma, Cambodia, Ivory Coast, Djibouti, Fiji, Grenada, Guinea, Guyana, India, Indonesia, Ireland, Israel, Jamaica, Jordan, Malaysia, Mauritius, Mongolia, Mozambique, Namibia, Nepal, Curacao, Paraguay, Portugal, Qatar, Sri Lanka, Taiwan, Thailand, Trinidad and Tobago, Tunisia, Uganda, United Kingdom, Uruguay, Vietnam, Zambia, Zimbabwe.
Now, is it because the days lapse thing, 1, 2, 3, is that why it did that?
That graph where
Every
you see the
single
day
one of
lapse,
those graphs?
that was people who died, and they had someone report it, and they said they got the shot this day, and then they died this other day, right? And so that graph was showing the deaths that were associated, how soon after the shot did the death occur. Okay, so it's associating the death in time to when the shot happened.
Yeah.
And the closer to when the shot happened, the more likely it means it's the shot that did it. And you saw that huge spike in the front. That's what that was. Okay. What you're just seeing are deaths around the world, but the way that they all spiked after the COVID shot was introduced in usually mandate form.
Mm.
These are stats on boosters. With all the math involved, this is your takeaway. You have to vaccinate between 22 and 30,000 college kids to have one kid from going to the hospital. But in that 22 to 30,000 people getting a shot, you're going to give between 18 and 98 serious adverse events, and anywhere between 1.7 to 3 cases of myocarditis. Now, might have heard myocarditis these days. I just showed you a thing where there's 50,000 cases of myocarditis. The thing about myocarditis is that they tried to describe it, like the media has been working hard to say, oh, myocarditis is a thing, oh, it's a mild case, it's just heart inflammation. This is not just heart inflammation. It is a hardened, established medical diagnosis. And if a child of 10 gets myocarditis, they have a 50-50 chance of surviving to their 18th birthday. This is not a mild thing. And now that we've gone enough time, you've been able to see other effects. Okay? What you have is life insurance is paying out more than ever. You've had, let me explain some of this in this. You've got age groups of people. You've got the kids, 0 to 17. You've got what's called prime of life people from 18 to 64. Then you have seniors, 65 and up, right? Now, prime of life people, in terms of life insurance talk, prime of life people, this middle group, they don't die very much. There's very, 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 very small amounts of mortality in that group. The kids and the seniors actually have higher mortality rates, but the middle group don't die very much. And so that's why life insurance loves us, and we pay our premiums, and they rake in their money, and right? Now, to have a 10% increase in death in that age group, that would take a once in 200 year catastrophe for that event to occur, to have a 10% increase. What we had at the end of 2021 was a 40% increase in death. Now, it's not like 40% of those people died. It's that small death rate went up by 40%. That's what I'm talking about, just that little increase. That's hard to qualify. If 10% is a once in 200 year catastrophe, 40% is hard to even describe. Who I'm quoting are life insurance industry CEOs that are talking about this. And it's not just that. Now, it's also, this is kids. Okay, what this line is, if this line stayed here, it would be the normal amount of deaths you expect. If it goes up, it's more deaths than what you expect. And what you have is this is the lockdowns, increased deaths. I've taken care of 200 people at least with COVID. I didn't lose one of them. Not one person died. But I had 2 children commit suicide. 2 of my patients committed suicide. Then you have mandates and boosters. 61,000 extra children died from the time they started mandating this to the time they rolled out to now. 61,000 extra children died than should have. 58,000 people died during Vietnam. This was Generation Y's Vietnam. It's just more and more. Out of every 10 people in England dying with COVID, 9 of them had the shot. And the more shots, the worse it was. This is, was there a question?
Yeah, I'm just saying their information is so much better than ours.
It is true.
Yeah.
Like what it makes me think is there are some people that are collecting stats in the United Kingdom that are not bought off.
Mhm.
But I will tell you that our FDA and CDC are bought off. Their behavior is not consistent with health. Their behavior is consistent with an orgy of profit for pharmaceutical industries.
One thing I know, the issue we had for reporting in the US, if a person came into an emergency room with COVID, if their vaccination was not part of the hospital system, if they got the vaccination out, they were not recorded as vaccinated, they were recorded as unvaccinated.
Yeah.
So that screwed everything up. So doctors are saying, oh my God, this is an unvaccinated issue, not a vaccinated issue. So it drove that.
The other thing was the definition of when you were fully vaccinated. Like you could get your first shot, and then you get your second shot, and it's after 30 days after your second shot was defined fully vaccinated, right? So you could have been in the process of getting shots and having harms, and they still would have called it unvaccinated,
Unvaccinated.
right? This is deaths in England, and this was May of 2022. This is this year, okay? This is a year starting backward from May of this past year. What you have are vaccinated people who are dying. And these are the unvaccinated people, okay?
They're calling it adult sudden death.
Yes, yes, yes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Instead of SIDS.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-mm.
It's just more. This is per month. If you took all the deaths attributed to the COVID shot in VAERS and you divide it out per month, since it's been deployed, okay, 2,200 people. All other vaccines, 29.5. And we're not going to ignore that, though. What about that? What about those 30 kids a month, okay, underreported? Now, here's what we think when we think about our vaccine schedule for our children, okay? We think it's what plucked us from the scourge of all of our infectious diseases, okay? Right? I mean, that's what we're told. So let's start looking at that. Here is diphtheria, okay? These are cases, not deaths, but cases, right? So you introduced a vaccine right around here, and look at this. God, that's fantastic. Look at how much less cases there is after they introduced the vaccine. But wait a minute. Now I'm talking 1940. Were there ever diphtheria cases before 1940? Why, yes, there was. Let's look at a longer time scale, shall we? How do we back it up to 1900? Relatively speaking, that's what happened, and then they introduced the shot. Okay? Well, that's just diphtheria. What about measles? Here's the CDC's chart. Measles shot was introduced. Yeah, around there. Instead, look at what measles was doing long before they introduced any shot. Whooping cough. That's when they introduced the shots. Let's back it up. Whooping cough with a longer sense of perspective. Okay, but that's just stuff that they had shots for. What about stuff they didn't have shots for? What about meningitis or dysentery? They decreased too. Scarlet fever and diarrhea, they decreased too. Tuberculosis, typhoid fever, they're all decreasing. All basically the same ways. So something must have happened good. What good did happen?
Standard of living, cleaner water, sanitation.
Bing, 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 bing. Ding, 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 ding. They had 40 states begin to have health departments. That means you can't throw shit in the street. You have to have clean food. You can't have cow manure mixed with your milk. They actually started to clean water, sanitation. And not every state started it at the same time. They started it in a staggered way. And so what that did is it gave you this perfect opportunity to measure, well, this state now is doing clean things and this state's not. What happens? Infant mortality rate went down, right? And then this state started doing it, another infant mortality rate goes down. And they were able to look at it, and they were able to actually get a firm look at this. That's a 70% drop in infant mortality rate when we started living cleaner. So what I'm telling you is this great country that we live in, that has this high standard of living, this magnificent health that we've enjoyed, wasn't because of our vaccine program, it was because of our plumbers. Now, let's look at the other question here. Not just, did the vaccines help us in the past, are they helping us now? Okay? So, the way you might be able to figure this out is if we start comparing. And those comparisons are mighty hard to find. In fact, these comparisons only became public in 2020. Believe it or not, the research for, hey, we have vaccinated people, we've got unvaccinated people. How are they doing comparatively? This has been avoided by our CDC, our vaccine approval processes. They might say because it's unethical to do these kinds of studies, because these things are so helpful, it's unethical to keep someone from getting it, right? Yet they still didn't do it. They're still guessing. So some things recently have come out, and so this is what we have. What you have here are the next information from all these slides you're about to see with this type of graph was done from a survey, okay? So what this is people looking back. Now it's not perfect science, but it's science, and it's this big old survey, and they looked at the base rates of how our population's doing, and then they managed to talk to, 1,500 people that never had shots. And they asked them about your health, big detailed survey. So this is looking back. Now what you've got children with chronic conditions that have been vaccinated, children with chronic conditions that have not been vaccinated, or multiple conditions, okay? These are adults. This is one condition, one chronic condition, this is 2, this is 5. I don't need to explain it, it's obvious, right? But let me break it down and let's go more detail. ADHD. Vaccinated children, unvaccinated children, and so forth. Asthma, autism, arthritis, and that's just the A's. Cancer, diabetes, developmental disabilities, digestive disorders. That was just through the D's. You'll spare me from going all the way through the alphabet. This is a different set of science. This is not looking back, how are we doing? Because people can be biased. This was, hey, I'm a pediatrician. Hey, pediatrician buddy. Hey, other pediatrician. But there's 3 pediatrician practices. And they would just take care of kids and their course of taking care of kids. And they had 3,000 kids participate in this study over the course of 10 years. So this is moving forward. This is actually much more robust science. It's called a prospective study. It's like much more juicy. And so what they have is, in this pediatrician practice, you got some kids who are getting shots and some kids who aren't. Okay, now let's see how they do. Now the way they're going to qualify how they do is how often they have to come in. Because let's face it, you don't go to a doctor very much unless you're sick, right? So what happens? What you have is the orange, again, is the vaccinated kids. And this is their office visits for asthma. This is the unvaccinated kids for asthma. So they still got some, but a hell of a lot less. This is behavioral stuff. This is ear infections. That's ear pain. This is ADHD. That's allergies and breathing issues and respiratory infections. All kinds of other infections. This is urinary infections, eczema, eye disorders, more eye disorders. That's conjunctivitis. That's just regular stuff. That's dermatitis, and that's anemia. On and on it goes. Scott.
Made today 2 studies about.
This is my science advisor.
About
And your IT guy.
Yeah, he's great. Nobody needs a Scott, go.
So between ages 0 and 2, if you vaccinate, they're now recognizing that the amount of aluminum in the infants are causing the asthma. And that came out
Today.
Today.
Interesting. It's very relevant to the conversation, the ongoing conversation Scott and I have. Aluminum. Now, I said before, what they do with a vaccine, a traditional vaccine, is they introduce the germ with an irritant. Okay, that irritant is a toxin. What that toxin is aluminum. Now, let me cut to the chase. Is there anything alive on the planet that uses aluminum for any biological process? No. Nothing alive uses aluminum.
There's reports it causes or is a contributor to Alzheimer's.
Yes.
Absolutely it does. Okay. Well, I'm sure people could argue it, but I would argue that it does. Okay? Because the aluminum salts and the tangles in different parts of neurological connections are riddled and caked with aluminum. Now, here's the thing about aluminums, right? There's different types of aluminums. There's I was looking this up. There was, because I knew you're coming, I wanted to make sure I gave you an answer. There's like aluminum magnesium alloy, that's our cans, right?
Oh,
There's aluminum chlorine salts, that's in our antiperspirants. Do not use antiperspirants, please. There's aluminum in those. And then there's aluminum hydroxysulfates. Those are the stuff that we get injected. Now, those aluminums are big and scary and toxic, and whoever sold you them in food would get put out of business. Yet they are injected because they're so toxic, and they irritate your body. They make your body go, ah, what's going on? And they deploy the immune system to go and try to figure out what the hell this is. Oh yeah, by the way, there's some other germs in there. Let's take notice of those too. And so it asks your body to notice and generate this response. Now, the problem is you don't encounter the germs like that in the wild. They come through the holes, right? You breathe them in, you eat them in, right? And so what happens when you encounter a germ normally in the wild, your immune system has layers as you go deeper and deeper. The immune system prepares a response, and then it prepares a deeper layer of response, and it prepares a deeper layer of response. And then when that germ gets deeper in, your body is well alarmed, well alerted, and prepared, and then it handles it, and then it remembers it. Do you guys remember the movie Red Dawn?
Mm-hmm.
A good one, not the more recent one. Yeah, Red Dawn, right? Like it was back in our Cold War era. The young folk may not remember this, but it was a movie that like any red-blooded American could get behind, right? Like the Soviets landed in the heartland of America and unified. Remember Red Dawn? Right? Patrick Swayze. Anyway, so that's kind of the thing that happens with a vaccine. You inject germs right into the bloodstream, right in the middle of things, right in the thick of stuff. And you're asking your body to make this hastened response, okay? Now, the other part to this that's so important is because this aluminum is so irritating, your body, your immune system will associate everything it's around with the same irritant. It just sweeps up everything that's there and accuses all of them of being bad germs and irritants. So here's the idea. If the aluminum is interacting with your own cells, your body will then attack its own cells. If that vaccine manufacturing process had pea protein in it or peanut proteins in it, your body will then blame peanuts as an allergen and attack them. If it had egg proteins in it, it will now attack the egg proteins. So why do you think we have allergies like crazy, right? Autoimmune conditions like crazy, because these aluminum irritants are getting your immune system to think all this normal, non-toxic stuff is actually a villain. Infant mortality rate is the way that you can track how countries are doing. A higher infant mortality rate means bad. They're not doing too good, okay? What you're seeing here, what you see here, this number here is the amount of vaccines a country recommends their kid before the age of 2. Okay, so you have countries that recommend a lot, still a lot, a little less, and a little less. What you have here is, this is also the infant mortality rate of all these countries. So, you know how stats work. Sometimes it's not a perfect fit, but the idea is, the more the shots they get, the higher their infant mortality rate is. And you guess which side of this graph America sits? You're all correct. Look at you.
24 to 26.
26. We recommend the most. Now, we've had a lot of talk around this COVID shot being rushed to market, and it was, right? It's not properly tested, and it wasn't. But we have this assumption that our other shots are, which they're not. Scott, how many days do the scientists monitor? When they first approved this, how many days did the Hib vaccine here, how many days did they check to see how the kids were doing before they said, yeah, this is good, we're good?
Yeah, we're supposed to do 60. Or was it 60 or 90?
You'd think where sometimes we get that idea is that after they're checking, they'll check in, okay, how you doing? They have a couple of days. Most of this is 1 week or less, 1 week or less. And this is supposed to give you immunity for the rest of your life. So they're automatically assuming it should have an effect on you for the rest of your life. But they're going to monitor this child for less than a week in most cases. See how they're doing. What this is, oh, hey, the parent's like, my kid, it's been 3 weeks now, but there's something going on. There's something going on. Can you check in with it? So they have to call back. And again, approximately 1% of the problems a parent will actually call on. And so now keep in mind what companies we're talking about here. We're talking about pharmaceutical companies. Pharmaceutical companies. Do they have a reputation for ethical behavior? Obviously not, right? I have a number up here. 87 billion, 15 million, 620,847. What is this number? This mysterious number. It's money. It's money. What this number is?
Wow.
These are criminal organizations. Have paid $87 billion in criminal and civil penalties and crimes. Oh, by the way, when they are charged with an actual crime, someone's doing time, no. We can turn this into a fine. We can convert our criminal acts to just civil penalties. And generally, usually our Department of Justice says, okay, well, we'll bygones be bygones. Just give us some money and we won't arrest anybody. No CEO goes to jail. No marketing department ever gets fired. Right? 20 years, over 1,000 different penalties. What is that? I did the math for you. That's about one a week. They commit a crime of some caliber once a week, every week. So this is just for the last 22 years.
And got caught.
Yes, Scott.
I have a question on that.
Everybody should have a Scott. Yeah.
Can you break that down between the quote normal vaccinations versus the COVID shot?
Oh. Well, no.
But other penalties.
No. So here's the thing. These these penalties, they haven't paid a dime for any of the harm done to any of those kids. They've not paid a dime for any harm done to any of the people who've died and been harmed by the COVID shots. Not a dime. This money is the money they've paid for all their other products.
Yeah, okay.
I have a question, because I remember this from school, because isn't it true that a pharmaceutical company cannot be sued for vaccine injury?
You are
They
correct.
can be sued for anything else, any other product, but a vaccine, they were immune from any, and that's a pun. They cannot be sued for vaccine injury.
You're correct.
Okay.
All
Okay, so-
vaccines or just the COVID one?
All.
Wait. Let's define it. There's the childhood vaccines on the recommended childhood schedule. all vaccines on the recommended childhood schedule are immune from all recourse. Okay? Now, the COVID shot was under something different. It's under the Emergency Use Authorization, the EUA. Okay? Now, the EUA also protected all the companies involved from what was like a law we did after like the whole anthrax thing. They passed a whole, I don't remember what it was, but that law protects any company participating in emergency use stuff. Okay? So either way, no company is gonna fish up any liability. Now, there is a fund that will pay out for children who've been harmed. A family needs to go through court and go up against the federal government to prove their case. It will typically take at least 3.5 years. All the while, they're doing this case because their kid was hurt. They, on average, will get about $250,000 after 3.5 to 5 years of fighting the federal government. And that $250,000 should be enough to pay for this disabled child's medical care only until they're about 18. And they already spent the first 50 grand in the first couple of years before the government actually forked up. And oh, by the way, that fund is a taxpayer funded fund. Okay? Pharmaceutical companies pay nothing for any of the harms of any of their products for vaccines. Furthermore, if we all collectively decided to boycott this, the government buys the doses. So there wouldn't even be an economic impact on them that way. They are completely
If we
shielded.
boycott what?
If we didn't ever get shots,
Oh, gotcha.
the government would still buy all the doses, the unused doses. The pharmaceutical industry is completely shielded from a crappy product, from any recourse from a crappy product. The risk is all on the user.
And wasn't there recent, I think I saw that medical mistakes, pharmaceutical mistakes are now the 4th leading cause of death? It's 3rd now in
Third.
the US.
Behind heart attacks, cancer, number 3rd on the list is our drugs and our surgeries. Our medical interventions, our medical care is the 3rd leading cause of death. And it has been for like 25 years. I'm gonna address that. Now, what I want you to start thinking here is, like, I have laid down a lot of heavy things. Now, what can we do about it? Right? So there are things happening. Okay, in the COVID shot arena, remember how I said they broke federal laws?
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's this group of people that are based West Coast. They managed to collect up 200,000 signatures on a petition. And then they got 2 Oregon state senators involved. And this group have applied for a grand jury investigation. Now, in our Constitution, our United States Constitution, we are allowed a grand jury to then decide the fate of whoever we're investigating, right? It bypasses the federal government, it can bypass state governments. It is the people's thing. It is the people's recourse, a grand jury. And that's what they're doing, right? They started this, because remember I was quoting you those numbers back in 2020, from March to August with that huge disparity, that 17-fold increase, right? Well, they started this then. And the process is still ongoing. Right now, what they've just done is they applied all this stuff, and finally the CDC said, dismiss the case, this is Hui. And so they have been rebutted and say, no, this is not Hui. We're coming for you, and you guys have broken the law. And so now it's in the hands of a federal judge. His name is Hernandez. He's in Western Washington State. A federal judge named Hernandez is deciding right now. His decision is imminent. It's actually a little overdue. So put some thought towards that federal judge named Hernandez on Washington State, that he'll say, yes, we're bringing this to trial. Yes, we're gonna bring out the evidence and we're gonna bring the CDC to trial. Because included in all the harm that this has done, it's also $3 trillion of misappropriated funds.
Oh, yeah.
That's our money. That's one thing. Here's another one. ICANN. I want you to remember that. ICANN. This is the Informed Consent Action Network. A guy by the name of Del Bigtree starts this. You might remember that name too, okay? They are the ones that said, hey, FDA. So here's the story. Pfizer gave you data and you, FDA, said, yep, it's good. Use that shot. They said, well, if you got the data, show us the data. We want to see the stuff. And then Pfizer says, oh, no, you can't see that. And the FDA says, no, we can't show you that. And so then a judge comes along and says, no, you got to do it. And so then the FDA says, no. Okay, we'll show you all the data, but we'll show you in 75 years.
That's true.
That's absurdity.
It's absolute absurdity. But there was a judge in Texas that said, that's absurdity. This is relevant right now. What they said is, we want the first 40,000 pages. There's like hundreds of thousands of documents. We want the first 40,000 pages now, and you're going to release 10,000 pages the first of every month until it's all out. We want it all, right? And so out it comes. And every month stuff comes out. And every month stuff comes out. And you know what comes out?
Redaction.
Yeah, there's some. But you know what's not even redacted? They had 15 women who were pregnant in their initial trial. And 7 of them lost their babies. Okay?
Wow.
40%, a 40% miscarriage rate. But what they said was, enlisting that reaction, they listed it as a self-resolving reaction. The same kind of caliber they would list a headache. Your baby has died, but you're not pregnant anymore, so there's no further reaction. It's a self-resolving reaction. They hid it. They hid it. They hid it over and over again. Yeah, yes, it killed your baby, but yeah.
The next question is, are they able to get pregnant again?
I didn't have a follow-up on those children. I don't know. I have had mothers who become pregnant after the shots. And I'm not going to talk about my experience because these are people that I take care of and I love. And I'm not going to talk about the people that I put my hands on every day. I am worried about some people I take care of right now. I'm worried about children I take care of right now. Because what they've known is as this shot filters its way through the body, it accumulates in the ovaries. It accumulates in the semen too, but men, we recycle our semen, we make new stuff. Women, they get one batch, and that's the batch they have from the time before they're born to the time they die. And this toxic substance builds up in a woman's ovaries. Will it affect her? They don't know. Could it affect her? Absolutely yes. What these groups did is not only that 75-year thing that they cracked through, the government actually set up an app. It's called the V-Safe app. And everybody who got a shot, not everybody, but people who were willing to do it, they have this data that they would report on their app. I got the shot, and so I'm reporting. So it was a means using digital technology to easily capture people's reactions, responses, and like this. And so this is a huge trove of data, and they've been after it for months, since it rolled out for 18 months. And the government's like, no, we're not giving you any information. No. Why not? Just no. No, really, why not? No. And so finally, again, a federal judge out of Texas says, we want the data, and they got it. They won. They won this court case. And in 2 days, that data is released. The 30th of September.
Where
Out
do
it
we
comes.
get it? Where do we get it?
Go to ICANN. And
ICANN.
he's going to have it all out there.
And ICANN stands again for?
Informed Consent Action Network. He has a network. It's called the Highwire. Del Bigtree. Okay. Now, if people who've been worried about COVID itself, there's all kinds of understanding around it and how to treat it early. Ivermectin, everyone knows it. Hydroxychloroquine, vitamin C, vitamin D, and zinc, among other things. There's things available, readily available, and I cannot give you these links if anyone wants them, okay? And then we have recovering from the virus as well as the vax. I just wanted you to see it. I don't need you to read it, but this is their index, and this is a long, big manuscript on this author interviewed all these experts on like what to do. There is hope for this. Okay, there's other online things where you can just get online and you can get a prescription to ivermectin for this. Now, I'm a chiropractor and I'm not a fan of basically any drugs. Okay, but like as drugs go, ivermectin is pretty darn good. Okay, it's been approved for human use since 1987. Obviously, you probably know that the person who developed it got a Nobel Prize for it. It ended scourges of different kinds of ailments all throughout Africa. It's cheap.
For cancer now.
You can use it for cancer, among a bunch of stuff. Like there's more and more stuff they're figuring out about how useful it is.
If you can find a doctor that'll prescribe it, that's the problem.
That's the thing. You go to these places and you get it. You get it, right?
Oh,
Well, it is a horse dewormer, you know?
Yeah, right. I know. You're taking horse dewormers? Yeah, Joe Rogan. All right. So,
Yep.
look. What? Now, again, me as a chiropractor, okay? What I teach people every day, your body is not dumb. Your body is powerful and wise. Your body and the power that made your body is always with you. And if you listen to it, it will generally lead you well. Now, if you haven't had practice listening to it, you might confuse your craving for chocolate or for some other thing, porn, or some other violent action, or for some other bad behavior. You might confuse your addictions with the wisdom inside you talking to you. But as you get better and better at listening and calibrate your listening, your wisdom inside you will lead you better and better. Okay? Now, I don't talk this, maybe the first time, I don't know, maybe not. Would it be helpful if there were an adult that went through college, that went through the school systems, and is a healthy adult? Would it be helpful to know an adult that has never had vaccines, never even had any medication? Does such a person exist?
Yes.
And me.
And you.
I've never had it.
While we're getting public with ourselves, yeah, my wife has never had vaccines. I've never had a vaccine in my life. I've never had a Tylenol. I've never taken an antibiotic. I've had alcohol. I tried a cigarette once on a dare. So I tell you this because I don't want to be so as to jinx myself, but like it can be done. It can be done. I think I'm a fairly healthy guy. It can be done. Okay. Now, I want to give you one more story here. I find this story so inspiring, and that's why I want to share it with you. It's 1989, and we're in Beijing, China. Gorbachev has just come to visit and left him there, so the world's media is there. Now, a leader in the Communist Chinese Party has just died, and people are mourning his death. And that ongoing mourning kind of turns into a protest. And that protest gets bigger. That protest begins to collect, you will probably already know, in Tiananmen Square. That protest gets more and more and more attention and more people involved until there's tens of thousands involved. And then the Chinese government cracks down on it. They take military divisions that are stationed in South China who've just recently fought the Vietnamese and reposition them in their capital city of Beijing. They bring armored vehicles and heavy caliber machine guns on their own citizens and gun down thousands of their own citizens. Soldiers come in and continue with small arms fire, shooting thousands more of their citizens, their own citizens. And then they drive over the bodies and smash the bodies to paste and wash them down the drains so that the present media can't find them. And this has all taken place, the worst of it the night before. And a column of tanks is now leaving Tiananmen Square to go make a patrol through the city. And a man who's had enough at that moment steps out away from the sidewalk in front of his column of tanks. This man doesn't know he's being filmed. This isn't virtue signaling. They're scared of him, they won't come out. Imagine the heat radiating off that tank, the smell of the diesel. And the world still doesn't know who that man is today. That man doesn't know that the world knows what he did. That man just had enough, and he's carrying groceries. And he still inspires the rest of the world. He just said no. I'm not like asking you to stand in front of the tank. But if in your own version, if it's worthy of you standing up for what you do believe in, we stand together and we stand together, treat each other like people at all times. Whether someone agrees with you or not, We still respect them as a person. But we keep standing up for what we know. I know that there are people who've driven all of this intentionally. But we're going to win this. Because we don't need a tank. We just need resolve that can stop a tank. And any little bit, any little time you speak up or speak out is a victory. Any little choice you make, every little one matters. So, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
You can clap, I don't mind. Do you have any questions?
I do.
Yeah.
So for re-entering the States, if you leave, I know that the requirements or the mandates have alternate to where it doesn't need a requirement for you to have a vaccination card to come into the States. I know that doesn't apply that to everyone that is a non-US citizen. Do you know anything about that?
No, the international laws of crossing borders and what COVID measures are very, 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 very complex. I think I know that if you're an American citizen coming from outside back in the U.S., they can't stop you from coming in. Likewise, most of my attention on this subject is for Canada because I have family in Canada. And as of Friday, Canada is now dropping its vaccine requirements across the border. So Americans can go in unvaccinated and Canadians can come through back unvaccinated. So it's getting better. I'll tell you this though, that whole mandate the vaccine was a push to give a reason for a vaccine passport. If you can get a vaccine passport, that means you can control people's behavior and their money. If you can control that, then you can control everyone in the society. I don't believe that fight is over. I know the mandates have calmed down. The vaccine passport idea has simmered down. But if that were a boiling pot of water, I think currently right now we've just managed to throw a big pile of ice in that pot. So it's not boiling anymore, but the heat is still on. And the same people who are pushing for that vaccine passport are still in power. Yeah. And I think that is still yet to come. We are in a fight. We are not in the beginning, and we are still not at the end. We're somewhere in the middle. You got that picture of the people I pay attention to. I can send this out to you guys.
Oh, yeah.
But that's
I got one thing.
Scott.
So you were asking about, so 2 weeks ago, we had our Uzbekistani employee come over for a week, and it was delayed because he had his vaccines from Russia were not good enough to come in, so he had to go get 2 shots of the Moderna before he was allowed to come in.
Okay, so that could be a U.S. thing, or it could be.
It is a U.S. thing.
So it's not, but it's not a U.S. Uzbeki thing.
No, it's just a U.S.
Just a U.S. thing. Well, so there's some insight. So the U.S. is still having that approach.
Do you think that with change of power coming up, will that change?
Depends on who's in power.
That's a tough question to answer. I don't know. I think there still is the momentum to say it's not required is still there. There's still a rolling momentum to be able to pass between borders. Paulina, I follow a channel on Telegram, which is an app, which is a messaging type app. And there's a channel on Telegram which is called the Freedom Flyers. I can forward that to you. And they talk about being able to travel without the COVID shot. Okay? Ways and means and attempts to do it. Okay?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
I think she somewhere had a question.
Did I inundate you with graphs? Good.
Can you send us the presentation?
Yes, I can. Now, what will help me is if you email me, and I'll just reply to you.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
Okay.
There you go.
My email is, it's easy, Aaron Rossi DC @gmail.
I hope we finally understand the coordination between big tech and CDC and the White House. As I understand,
There's some momentum in that
there's
area
a
as
lot
well.
of coordination between the two to suppress information, so we really didn't have informed consent. So I hope all that blows up and we finally understand what went on when it comes to that.
I hope it's blown up and scattered to the wind. So my perspective on the media is, in general, one of two things. And this is generally all media, okay? All mainstream media. It's either it's lying to you or it's misleading you. This is my opinion. I think that the media is so controlled and corrupt that it will send its attention, they will send our attention in any way that's not the way. Like, if the important thing's going on over here, the media will have us all look over here. That is my opinion on it. So in some ways, I kind of pay attention to what the media is talking about, the news cycle of things. When news cycles pop up, it's my opinion that, okay, well, that's clearly the distraction. What else is going on? This is my opinion of it. Anyway.
So it's AaronRossiDC.com?
@gmail.com. AaronRossiDC @gmail.com.
I missed the Gmail.
Yeah,
Thank you.
@gmail. Any other questions?
I thought it was interesting, and I recognize the music at the end there, which is Thomas Newman. But
Look at you.
The movie Road to Perdition.
That's right.
Oh, my.
Yeah.
I'm a glutton for dramatic. Any other questions?
Do you have I know that Bridge and I have talked about this, do you have a specific protocol for people who have been vaccinated and want to try to pull toxins?
Specific
out
protocol,
of their
no.
body? You don't?
But there are high points.
Mm-hmm.
Like one I didn't mention before was silica-rich mineral water.
Okay.
That is known to help pull aluminums out of your body.
What
Okay.
about diatomaceous earth? Is that gonna be
That's
doing
silica.
the same
Now,
thing?
it's silica. It's silica rich.
Yeah.
Taking diatomaceous earth is like drinking mud.
Oh, I know.
Yes. I've done it plenty of
Because
times.
of the mold, yeah, with Bridge,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's down it goes.
Yeah. So unless you don't want to be mean to yourself, maybe Fiji water is well known for that, I guess. And green beans have a lot of silica in it too.
Okay.
So there's that, but also, of course, vitamin D, vitamin C, and zinc, quercetin, sunlight,
Mhm.
and let's not forget, you guys, I took care of 200 people
Mhm.
with COVID. None of them had long COVID, none of them went to the hospital, none of them died, right? I've also taken care of lots of people who've had the shot. And while some have had reactions, they're still smaller. Now, I've had some people who haven't been getting adjusted that had more severe reactions. But bodies still respond well when getting adjusted, okay? That is also a tool, okay? Your nervous system goes through your spine, and a chiropractor works on your spine. And if your nervous system is better, everything else is better. There's chiropractic in a nutshell, okay?
Mhm.
So yes, there's several things there.
Okay.
Yes, sure.
Cilantro helps too, detox heavy metals.
Cilantro helps bind the metals. That's also, yeah, you gotta have a lot of it.
Mhm. Okay.
Any other questions or thoughts? Well, apparently you guys aren't too bored. You're not hurrying out.
This is interesting. I wish
Yeah.
I'd known this a year ago, just a year ago.
Yeah.
That's when I took my J&J shot, because my inner being said, no, don't take it, but I had so much pressure. And I couldn't find information to defend my position. So I was like, okay.
I know.
So it's just.
Listen. I have people that I cherish, love, and respect that all made those same choices, right? But like this is the thing. People who chose to get a shot, honestly, no blame. Some of the doctors who said, yeah, sure, very little blame. It's other places. like we were lied to.
Yes, and the lack of information.
Yeah, somewhat deliberately.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
if I may say, highly deliberately.
Yeah.
You know,
No
Wha-
question.
one year ago, many different medical boards got letters saying, if you give advice counter to our narrative, we will strip you of your license.
Yes.
And we will rob you of your means of. So it's like their version of get the shot or lose your job. Okay, well, don't talk positively about the shot and lose your job. Right?
Now it's California law.
And now it's California law. It hasn't passed yet. It hasn't
It's
passed yet.
Oh, it hasn't? I thought it did.
Wait,
Did it pass? I know it's being voted.
What's
Yes,
about to be
this, a
California
state
law?
law that's on the docket to be voted on. I'm not sure where it's at. It's like right on the precipice. This bill to be passed says, again, if a doctor is giving health misinformation, they're going to attack the doctor, fine and harm the doctor. So in other words, there is actually a law that's going to say no second opinions. Second opinions are illegal. That's basically what they're doing. They're going to handcuff doctors and mute up doctors in California. So who's ever behind things like that, that's big money from far offshore, that are pushing things like that.
Oh, big time.
So yeah, we're still in the middle of this, except we've dodged one bullet, but there's still more to come.
Well, America's frontline doctors were chastised and a lot of their practices were highly damaged.
How about the person who started American Frontline Doctors, Dr. Simone Gold, Simone Gold,
That's right.
was charged a misdemeanor, but still went to prison for 60 days. She's never had a crime done before, no criminal record, nothing like this. 60 days she was in jail for a misdemeanor, trespassing misdemeanor. So yes, they are attacking people who are speaking out.
But some of the doctors are getting sued and the nurses too for the vaccine and not the pharmaceutical companies.
You
Yeah.
mean, for giving the vaccine? The doctors and nurses are getting sued,
Yeah.
but not the.
There was an attempt on a broader scale. The administration was trying to establish an office of disinformation.
Yeah, it didn't go very far, thankfully.
No, it didn't.
But
Thank
there's
God.
probably going to be other iterations of it.
Of
I mean,
course.
besides, they may not even need it because big tech and the government are so
You're doing it
friendly these
anyway.
days.
Yeah. Just openly,
I
orally.
still think it's all gonna get blown up by litigation.
I hope so. So here's a way that could happen. There actually is litigation that's very slowly going its way through. There's a guy named David Martin. He's a PhD who's pushed a lot of stuff. He's a patent expert. He's the guy that brought forward the public awareness that the coronavirus, this germ, is patented, and all its pieces are patented. There's 40,000 patents that are associated with this one germ. And he's bringing that light. This is like, you can't get a coronavirus out in the public without it being like made in China, whatever, right? Like, it's all rather well controlled. But anyway, here's the point. What was my point? David Martin. He is working on a similar court case, and the defendants are people like the CDC, the FDA, the White House, and so forth, right? And here's the idea. If they can find any legal wrongdoing with any of the companies inside that shell of the EUA, the emergency use, if they can crack that shell with any illegal action, the EUA protection falls away, and everybody who's involved in this is now subject to all manner of lawsuit.
Well, I'm gonna be praying on that.
I know. But if that gets cracked open,
Mhm.
then more headway.
Mhm.
What else you guys got? Anything else?
I'll just email you to remind you.
Thank you. All right, guys, we are done.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Very informative.
Really good. I wish more people were here.
I do too. I'm so
Well,
very
listen,
sad about that.
Sharon promoted it. Thank you, Sharon. And I sent one email out. There's 12 of us here after one email. It's not too bad. But if I sent 2 emails out, then I got more.
But how many people did you send the email to?
200.
Jeez, 10. Oh,
But that's normal.
jeez.
That's not normal.
Oh, jeez.
That's true, it is. It is
Yeah.
a response, 6%.
So, do you force because of your company?
Stop it, yeah.
Oh, no, do you